I just want to welcome everyone. I'm Dan Martin. I'm the Safe Community Coordinator here in the village of New Lenox. And I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight. What a great turnout, not only in here for this training, but also thank you for visiting all of our wonderful organizations outside in the Rotunda area out there, as well as the Touch a Truck organizations too. Thank you for coming out tonight. At this time, it's my pleasure. I'd like to introduce our mayor, Mayor Tim Balderman.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for being out here. It's, this is such a great community and such a great area. I rushed over here as quickly as I could because I was just over at the Laraway Communication Center because our police department and some neighboring police departments have got the Citizens Police Academy starting right now, which is really important for people to participate. And our Safe Communities Coalition, and Dan Martin does such an amazing job with that. I'll talk about that in a second. This big umbrella of safe communities, there is so much happening there for New Lenox and beyond, and Dan mentioned the 50 or so participants out there. So many of them are active members in safe community and do so much for all of us. And so as the mayor, I'm really very, very grateful for that. I look out and I see the green and yellow of our CERT volunteers. They are amazing with everything that we do in the village of New Lenox. We could not do that without these volunteers for CERT, so a big thank you to all of you for all that you do, and I know you go beyond our borders as well, and that's what we do. We're one big community. Our friends from the National Weather Service, thank you for being here. They just gave me some bad news. I'm not a good flyer, and I'm flying out Saturday morning. They told me it might be a little bumpy. I'm not a fan of that, guys. I want you to know. But I do want to, one more time, and a big thank you to Lincoln Way West always for being a big host. But I just want to take one moment. If you don't know Dan Martin, you should. Dan is a guy that has been a professional working for the citizens for many, many years. When we asked Dan to head up his department and we talked about safe communities and all that it entails, I knew he would hit a home run, but he didn't. He hit a grand slam, and he continues to just deliver. On opening day, I guess that's appropriate, but he continues to deliver over and over again. So Dan, I want to give you a big round of applause. Thank you so much. All right, I'll turn it over to the experts again. Thank you to our hosts. Thank you to our participants, our Touch a Truck participants as well, and everyone involved in safe communities. Have a great night, everybody.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right, thank you, Mayor. Again, very busy man. He always comes out for this to say hello to everybody. We really appreciate him. I won't take just but a few seconds more. I just want to tell everyone, immediately following this presentation, we're going to have, you see all these raffle prizes. That was compliments of all of our wonderful organizations that you visited outside there. So we're going to do, everyone in here should have a raffle ticket. We're going to do a drawing at the very end. In addition, our friends from ShareFest, they've got a huge box truck outside that we're going to position during the presentation, and they've got boxes of food for everybody when you leave. So even if you don't need some food, this is good stuff. Please pass it along to someone that may benefit from it. Okay, so please take a box on your way out. So with that, I'd like to introduce our friends. We've got Brett Borkhardt from the National Weather Service, as well as Mike Bardu. These gentlemen do a great job. We appreciate them coming out. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Brett.
Thank you. All right, good evening, everyone. I'm just going to echo the comments from before. Thank you all for coming out tonight on the eve of what may be a pretty busy, severe weather day tomorrow. So you're all doing the right thing being here, looking to see what's going to go on and how to be a weather spotter for us. By the way, I'm a talker and walker, so I'm going to move around the stage here. My apologies if I go in front of the screen. What we like to start off with here, let me turn my clicker on, is we like to start off with a video. And this is a video from a storm chaser. It's being used with permission. There's no sound with this video, so I'm going to narrate it. They're on I-355, not too far from here, near the Bolingbrook Promenade, looking south. near 75th Street. You can see it looks pretty gnarly out there with the winds whipping toward the dashboard. They're located on the outside of an EF3 tornado. This tornado struck Woodridge, Naperville, Willow Springs in 2021. And the reason why we show this video, there's two reasons. Number one, this is what tornadoes look like in the Chicago metropolitan area at night. They're often rain-wrapped. You will not see them. And this is a situation where it's not a safe time to spot. You're not going to be able to spot the tornado. And that's the second reason why we show this video. It's moving overhead right now is because this is not a situation we want you to be in. This is what we want to avoid. And being informed citizens, having a good pulse on the weather is how you avoid this kind of situation. Granted, this person was looking for the tornado, but that is what it looks like in the Chicago metropolitan area. As it was moving over them, it was producing EF1 to EF2 damage. That's pretty strong on the EF scale. In particular in Woodridge, it was actually taking several floors off of several homes and roofs off apartment buildings. So that's a situation we want to avoid. But here's a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to go over a brief introduction about the National Weather Service, a climatology of severe weather. Then we're going to talk about thunderstorms, the basics of thunderstorms, what may be going on tomorrow as you look outside the window. Mike's going to talk about spotter and forecasting tools, safe storm spotting. That's one of the most important modules of the training tonight is how to stay safe. And at the very end, we're going to wrap it up with how and what to report. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Many of you may be familiar with the National Weather Service. We are a federal agency and we're a part of the Department of Commerce. And our office, we're located in Romeoville, about 30 minutes down the road near Lockport. Some of you may have seen the big golf ball on top of a big platform. That's our radar. So if you have an app, the radar is coming from our backyard. And we have a dedicated team of 24 staff members, about 12 of those, actually 15 of those meteorologists, management staff, and technicians and support staff. And we operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The weather doesn't just stop at 5 p.m. on a Friday or on Christmas or Thanksgiving or a holiday. That's sometimes when the weather is at its worst, so that's why we are there to ensure that we complete our mission, which is the protection of life and property as well as the enhancement of the U.S. economy. Now, we are responsible for forecasts and warnings, so when you hear of a tornado warning, a severe thunderstorm warning, we're going to talk about those, but also winter storm warnings, high wind warnings. Those come from our office. Those come from our meteorologists. We're literally the ones clicking the buttons on the computer. We also do special services for marine, like Michigan, fire weather. You probably see all the controlled burns. We also do forecasts for the burn crews, aviation, and other sectors. And we're one of 122 forecast offices across the entire nation and U.S. territories, surrounded by an office in Milwaukee, Davenport, Lincoln, Indianapolis, Northern Indiana, and Grand Rapids. And that's not including national centers such as the Storm Prediction Center or the National Hurricane Center. We're behind the scenes issuing all those watches and warnings and funded by taxpayers. So thank you all for paying your taxes. So let's talk a little bit about severe weather. I always like to talk about the definitions right at the beginning here. And this is what we consider to be severe weather. Any tornado is considered severe in our eyes. They're a pronounced threat to life and property. Now, we rate tornadoes using the EF scale, that's Enhanced Vegeta scale. It's similar to the F scale. It was revised in I think it was the early 2000s. But that's how we categorize tornadoes, and it is a damage-based scale. So as a tornado is ongoing, we actually cannot categorize the tornado because we cannot estimate the wind speeds. We have to look at the damage after the fact. And we break it into different categories, weak, strong, and violence as you go up the scale, EF2, EF3, EF4, EF5. The severity gets worse, just like the Saffir-Simpson scale for hurricanes. There's also such a thing as the EFU, that stands for EF unknown. That's when there's no damage produced and we can't do a rating. That's probably the best case scenario in our eyes because there's nothing got touched, nothing got damaged. We'll just categorize it as an EFU. But that's something to keep in mind that it is a damage-based scale. Now, when it comes to hail, we consider severe hail any hailstone that's larger than 1 inch in diameter. That's about the size of a quarter. And anything that's greater than 2 inches in diameter is a particular threat to life and property. That could seriously hurt you if it hits you in the head. And severe winds are anything greater than 58 miles an hour. It may seem like a weird number. That's 50 knots, so that's where the even number comes from. But that's roughly 60 miles an hour. That's the wind speed where you start to damage trees. As you go higher, greater than 75, 80 miles an hour, that's when you'll start damaging structures. And then finally, we consider flash flooding to be severe weather as well, and that's flooding that occurs with a rapid onset. Those are EF scale there, I already talked about that. But we like to hit right at the beginning here the difference between flash flooding and so-called regular flooding. The main difference is really the onsets. Flash flooding is a rapid rise in water. It requires an immediate action to protect your life and property. That differs from, sorry, I keep going in front of the projector there. I'll pick one side here. That differs from so-called regular flooding. That's just a rise in water that causes damage to, say, property. It's usually a rapid or rather it's a slow onset from hours to days. Flash flooding typically occurs in the span of minutes to hours. Most of our flash flooding is urban flash flooding. It just rains so hard that the storm drains can't keep up, especially as you get into more of the urban core of Chicago. All it takes is about an inch of rain to cause flash flooding. So that's most of the time what we have to deal with. If you go out west, especially where there's topography in the Rocky Mountains or the desert Southwest, they can get some flash floods where it doesn't even rain and the water travels downstream and it's like, wow, where did that come from? So that's the difference between flash flooding and so-called regular flooding. Now, in terms of a severe weather climatology, that's kind of a big word, climatology. Climate is basically weather over a long period of time, and ology means study of, so it's the study of patterns over a long period of time. Our severe weather season typically runs from April to September. So what is today's date? It is March 30th. We're about to jump into April, and right on cue, we're expecting severe weather tomorrow. It's actually a pretty big threat for severe weather locally for our area. Now, typically, tornado season runs from April to August, but you can get tornadoes any time of year, and that's going to be a recurring theme throughout the talk. We can get severe weather any time of year. We've actually already had tornadoes in January and February of this year. It looks like we may even add March to the year, so you can get them any time of year. The hail season is typically in the spring to summer, so April to July. As you go further throughout the year, the threat typically changes, so damaging wind is more common in the summer months, and flash flooding is more common from late summer to early fall. But again, we've had severe weather in all months throughout the year. It's just more typical in the springtime and summertime since the sun angle is a little higher, it's a little hotter in the atmosphere, and it's just easier for thunderstorms to develop. Now, when you look at a typical year, we normally have about 16 tornadoes in our area. We cover an area roughly from I-39 to Valparaiso, about as far south as Bloomington, Illinois. We typically see about 16 tornadoes, roughly 6 days per year. That's normal for our area. We typically see more hail, typically 14 days a year with severe hail greater than an inch in diameter. But by and large, our most common threat is damaging winds. That's winds strong enough to down tree limbs or even damage structures. We typically see damaging winds about 23 days a year, and sometimes significantly damaging winds more than 7 days per year. But we're just barreling into severe weather season. Tomorrow's a day where we can see all three hazards, even tornadoes. So it's just really great that you're all here tonight to learn about severe weather. In terms of timing, tornadoes are most common in the late afternoon and evening. We like to talk about the dinner time hour, so really from 5 to 7 p.m. For some reason, that just seems to be the peak time for tornadoes in our area. But we've had them at really any time of day. A few notable examples are the Naperville EF3 tornado from the video at the very beginning. That whole tornado occurred after 11 p.m. Taylorville, Illinois was also hit by an EF3 tornado that was in December, so hitting that point that they can happen outside the springtime months. Coal City, Illinois also had a nighttime tornado, and then Washington, Illinois, one of the more notable tornadoes in recent memory, that occurred in November at 10 in the morning. So just be weather aware throughout the entire year. That's really the main message we want to pass on. So that section's usually pretty fast. Why don't we jump right into the basics of thunderstorms? We're going to get into some science here and some things you can look out the window and see yourselves. So when we talk about thunderstorms, we talk about weather. Sometimes we talk about ingredients like baking a cake. And there are three main ingredients that we need for thunderstorms. The first ingredient, let's say the flour for the base of the cake, is moisture, and that is the fuel for thunderstorms. Sometimes when you walk outside, if it's so humid, it's like you're wearing the air. That's rocket fuel for thunderstorms. So as humidity increases, that's more moisture in the air, higher chances for thunderstorms. Now, our moisture often comes from the Gulf of Mexico. I know it seems kind of crazy, but that air works its way north with big weather systems like what's going to happen tomorrow. But also in the middle of summer, farm fields can also provide moisture. When corn gets really high, corn is actually like a faucet to the atmosphere. It's really bad at retaining moisture. So in the summertime, when you're near a cornfield, it's going to feel a lot more humid out there. So actually, it raises our dew point, the amount of moisture in the atmosphere. Now, the second ingredient that you need, let's say the sugar or the eggs, that is instability. It's related to moisture, but instability is warm or humid air below cold air. And we always like to talk about hot air balloons. When you have a hot air balloon, you pull the little lever, it puts fire into the balloon, the air gets hot, and it rises. It's unstable. And the bigger the difference, the temperature difference from, let's say, the ground to above our heads, the greater the instability. And some of you may have heard of CAPE. That is a measure of instability. That's just one of the fields that we use. But moisture and instability are two vital ingredients. Now, the third ingredient, and this is the most important ingredient, is lift. You need a way to lift the air. Now, that can be a front, such as a warm front or a cold front, or even a jet stream 35 or 40,000 feet above our heads. That could also lift air as well. A big low pressure system is another way to lift air. So you really need all three ingredients together to generate thunderstorms. That's why we don't have thunderstorms every waking minute of the day. That's a good thing. But when you have all those three ingredients in the neighborhood like tomorrow, that's when you have to watch out for thunderstorms. Now, the average thunderstorm typically has three different cycles. There's a thunderstorm cycle, three different stages. The first stage is what we call the cumulus stage, and that is where you have an updraft. That's a term we're going to hear a lot. That's air that moves up, so it's intuitive. And that is warm, moist air going up. It condenses and forms a cumulus cloud. How many of you have seen a cumulus cloud outside? It's a big puffy cloud. It looks like cotton candy. That's the first stage of a thunderstorm as it's developing. Now, if you have enough instability and lift, then you can go into the mature stage. That is when you actually have a thunderstorm. You have rising air going up. That's the updraft. And you now develop that secondary branch called the downdraft. That's air that's going down. And that is the rain-cooled air. It's nature's air conditioning. And that is the mature phase of a thunderstorm where you have both air streams happening in tandem. Now, with time, the cold air gets bigger. It spreads out like it's air conditioning. It actually cuts off the updraft. It chokes it, such that the updraft no longer can develop. And that is what we call the dissipating stage. So you have all three stages here. Every single thunderstorm goes through this exact evolution. And what I encourage all of you to do, tomorrow could be a day to do this, is to look for these three stages when looking out the windows. Look for that initial cumulus stage. The mature stage is when you see the rain downdraft, rain-cooled air, and then the dissipation stage where you have, looks like a big anvil cloud, a big anvil up in the atmosphere with nothing under it. Those are the three stages of a thunderstorm. And a single-cell thunderstorm, we're going to talk about different types of thunderstorms. These are the three stages of a single-cell thunderstorm. It's one single cell. We have a quick video here. I don't think this one has audio. Oh, it looks like it does have a little bit of audio, but we're just going to watch the three stages. This is the initial stage, the cumulus stage. You can see the clouds going upward. This is sped up, by the way. This is about 5 times speed. You won't see it like this in real time. What we want to watch for the mature phases, we're going to be watching the base of that cloud. We're looking for signs of precipitation, for rain. That's the sign of the downdraft, the air moving down. We're not quite there. It starts to look a little opaque right now. Maybe we're quite getting there. It looks like, yeah, now we're getting some precipitation. Also notice at the top of the cloud, we're starting to spread out. What's going on is our updraft is actually meeting the troposphere. That's a layer of air well above our heads, and it's spreading out. We're now in the mature phase. You can see the rain falling below. It's a mature thunderstorm. You have the updraft and the downdraft. And with time here, the downdraft is going to start to choke off the updraft, and we're going to go to that third stage, which is the dissipation stage. It's a great example. This was taken out in the desert Southwest, it looks like, but we see this outside over our heads all the time. It's a very basic evolution of a thunderstorm. So let's talk a little bit more about updrafts and downdrafts, because these are key critical features to be able to identify when out in the field. So updrafts are where warm and moist air rises up into a storm. It's identified by a dark, rain-free cloud base, and I'm going to have a picture of that here shortly. Now, if a storm has a wall cloud, we're going to talk a lot about wall clouds later on, it's going to be located near the updraft because that's where air is going into the storm. And sometimes we talk about inflow. We like a lot of terms that make sense. It's air going into the storm. You have inflow into the updraft, so in and up. And that is what happens in updrafts. So here's a great picture of an updraft. The picture actually I took when in central Kansas out on a little field trip. But you can see the clear rain-free base. You can see the base of a cloud. It almost looks like a flying saucer. You could almost just infer the barber pole, the air going up into this storm. And it's not quite pictured on the right-hand side as the downdraft. We're going to look a little bit more on the next slide here. But this is what an updraft will look like. It's not always going to look this dramatic. This is what we call a supercell. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But it's just a great example of an updraft. Now, downdrafts are the opposite of updrafts. That's air going down. It's rain-cooled air, nature's air conditioning. It often has a dark or murky appearance in the distance, and the reason why is because it's rain and sometimes even hail that's obscuring the sky. Now, it may be accompanied by a shelf cloud. We're going to have plenty of examples since it's a very common cloud that you're all likely going to see. And is associated with outflow. Just as inflow goes into an updraft, outflow goes out of a downdraft, and that is rain-cooled air moving away from the storm. Here's a great example of a downdraft. Notice it looks quite different than the picture on the left-hand side. It looks quite murky, and that's a downdraft. That's rain-cooled air, outflow going out of the storm. So two very common sights that you're likely going to see, maybe not as dramatic on the left-hand side, but you're likely going to be able to identify updrafts and downdrafts when you're spotting. Now, we talked about the three ingredients for thunderstorms. When it comes to severe weather, there's actually a fourth ingredient that we need, and that is wind shear. And wind shear describes the change in wind speed and or direction with height. We all live on the ground of planet Earth. There's some astronauts that live way above our heads. But we are typically concerned with what happens on the ground. What is the wind speed doing on the ground? In reality, the atmosphere is three-dimensional. There's a lot of difference in wind direction and wind speed with height. When you're flying in an airplane, the wind speed is very different than at the ground. And that is what, as meteorologists, Mike and I look at when we're forecasting severe weather. Now, weak shear means that there's not a change of wind direction or height or wind speed with height. And the reason why weak shear is detrimental to severe weather is because it keeps the updraft and the downdraft close together. So when we progress through the 3 different stages, we go from the cumulus stage to the mature phase, we actually progress to that dissipation stage because the downdraft chokes off the updraft. When you have a lot of shear, changing your wind direction with height or wind speed, it actually separates the updraft and downdraft. It physically separates them. And when that happens, your downdraft, the outflow, cannot choke off your inflow. And when that happens, the thunderstorm lasts a lot longer. And that is how you get severe weather, because the storm can intensify even further and do all sorts of bad things. So that's why wind shear is important to keep in mind. It's the change in wind speed with height. On a big severe weather day like tomorrow, I guarantee you're going to be able to look up and see the clouds just screaming by. That's a sign of wind shear, because the wind speed's higher above our heads than it is on the ground. It's a pretty typical sign of a severe weather day. Now, generally speaking, as you increase wind shear in the atmosphere, the severity of a storm also increases in tandem. And you also have different types of storms with different wind shear as well. So as you go from left to right on the chart here, you're going from little shear to more shear. You change your storm mode from single cells, that's the 3 stages of the thunderstorm that we talked about. You go to multi-cell clusters or lines, squall lines, we're going to talk about those. In environments with lots of wind shear, like tomorrow, you can actually get supercells, and those are the most dangerous type of thunderstorms because they're the longest lasting and potentially the most prolific with hail, damaging winds, and tornadoes. So let's talk about those different types. We already talked about the single cell thunderstorm with the 3 different stages. Let's talk about multi-cell storms and squall lines. This is a very common type of thunderstorm in our area, perhaps the most common type of thunderstorm in our area. And what these are is there's multiple cells. So I'm going to walk across the stage here again, but I want to point out, notice the multiple thunderstorms, multiple cells included in this whole system. That's why it's called a multi-cell system. We try to keep it intuitive. And many squall lines or multi-cell systems are associated with a shelf cloud along the leading edge. In the next few slides, we're going to have some great pictures of that. And the phrase to keep in mind with squall lines is that the worst is first. Typically, the worst weather happens along the leading edge, and then it gradually gets better. However, squall lines can and do produce tornadoes. In fact, some of our biggest tornado events in our area are produced by squall lines. I have a few examples listed there. June 30th, 2014, we actually had 2 squall lines move through our area and collectively produced 30 tornadoes, our biggest tornado event we've ever had in our area. So squall lines, while they typically are our most common type of severe thunderstorm, they also produce a lot of tornadoes too, so something to keep in mind. Oh, and by the way, the Naperville tornado a couple years ago was produced by a squall line. This is a cross-section, if you were to just do a slice through a squall line, what it looks like, so almost 3-dimensional. We like to show this to show the different airflow. The updraft is along the leading edge of a squall line, so that's where the inflow, the air is going in and up into the updraft. The downdraft is really behind the updraft, that's the outflow. Now, when you have the warm, moist air really close to the cold air that's descending, like on the bottom left-hand side, you actually can get a pretty dramatic cloud along the leading edge, and that's what we call a shelf cloud. And shelf clouds are very common. I guarantee some of you have seen this. You're going to see it in the future here. It marks the leading edge of the cool outflow or the downdraft with moving out from the storm. And frankly, any storm can have a shelf cloud, but multi-cell clusters and squall lines most commonly have shelf clouds. Now, the way to determine whether you're looking at a shelf cloud or a different type of cloud is shelf clouds go across the entire horizon. If you look from side to side, you don't see the end of it. It's literally a wall moving toward you. That is a shelf cloud. It looks like a shelf literally moving toward you. Now, strong or potentially damaging winds are likely as it moves overhead. It's literally the leading edge of the outflow, so it's a marker that it's time to go indoors. And sometimes you may see rolling motion or even sometimes a horizontal motion along the edge of a shelf cloud. I like to think of a pool noodle. It's really flat. I'm going to put the microphone down. As it's rotating along a horizontal axis, you may see that with the shelf cloud. Sometimes we get phone calls at our office reporting rotation with shelf clouds. We understand it can be a little bit confusing. The type of rotation we're more concerned about, and we'll talk about this later, is when it's about a vertical axis like a barber pole. So if you see a little bit of horizontal rotation with the shelf cloud, it's nothing to be alarmed about. It's just turbulent motion within the cold air. I have a few more pictures of shelf clouds just to show some examples. The one on the bottom from Campton Hills, that's in Kane County, is just a fantastic example of what a shelf cloud looks like. It goes across the entire sky at just the whole horizon. A really great picture from Barry Butler. It looks very ominous there as well. We see several of these every single year. They're very photogenic. They're not necessarily a precursor to tornadoes, so if you see one, it doesn't mean a tornado is coming. It just means damaging winds are coming along the leading edge. Now, if we move on to the last storm type, the supercell, these are the rarest type of thunderstorm just because it takes so many ingredients to come together just right. But at the same time, they're potentially the most dangerous because they can produce any type of severe thunder or any type of severe weather. Now, they are defined by a rotating updraft, like a barber pole. It's literally spinning. The air is spinning as it goes into the storm. And we call that a mesocyclone. It's just kind of a funny word there. Meso is a word when we're talking about small-scale weather. Cyclone is spinning air, so a mesocyclone. Now, they're often discrete, meaning they're by themselves, and they have a distinctive look with a hook echo. A lot of you have probably heard of a hook echo. A hook echo is quite literally that little appendage that extends out from the storm. That is the hook echo right there. Sometimes we talk about a flying eagle. It looks like the wingspans and the talons that are extending down from the eagle of the storm. That is a very common presentation of a supercell. And by the way, if you see a hook echo, that doesn't mean a tornado is coming. It just means you have a supercell. It means your storm is rotating. We have plenty of situations where the storm is rotating, but there's nothing happening at the ground. And that is usually what happens. In order for a tornado, you need rotation from the ground all the way through the depth of a storm. Now, supercells are most common in the spring to early summer, so roughly from March to June, but you can get them any time of year. And the majority of strong tornadoes, especially EF4 and EF5s, are produced by supercells. So anytime we see that hook echo on radar, it's a sign that we need to pay close attention to this storm. Again, it doesn't mean a tornado is imminent. It just means we're dealing with a supercell. Now, supercells have a very dramatic appearance when you see them out in the field. This is a really great picture here from Byron, Illinois in 2015. They often have a circular structure with curved cloud bands. We call those striations. That's on the left-hand side, just to the left of the nuclear facility there. And many supercells have what we call wall clouds, and we're going to show that in a couple slides here. This is just a fantastic example because you can visualize those two different airflows, and notice how the wind shear literally separates those airflows. That's why wind shear is so important for severe weather. On the left-hand side of the image is the updraft. That's the rain-free base. It's pretty darn close to the ground, but that is our updraft. The right-hand side looks dark and murky. That's our downdraft with heavy rain and hail. So anytime you're out spotting, these are the features you want to be looking for, trying to determine the potential for severe weather. Now, not all supercells look that dramatic. This is the picture I took in 2020 near Manuka. You can see on the left-hand side the supercell. You can see the hook echo protruding down to the south side of the storm. You can still make out the two different features, though. On the left-hand side of the image is the updraft and rain-free base. There is a little bit of rain in the background there, but otherwise you can see the updraft. That's inflow air going into the storm. The right-hand side is a downdraft with heavy rain and hail. The radar image doesn't look overly menacing in this storm. It looks pretty cool, but it doesn't look overly menacing either. This storm was producing continuous cloud-to-ground lightning when I took this picture. I took this from just outside my car. I was very quick to get back inside the car. So just to show that all supercells, even if they're not severe, really all thunderstorms for that matter, are still dangerous because they produce thunder and lightning by their very definition. Now let's talk a little bit more about wall clouds. Wall clouds are associated with supercells, and they're a lowering of the cloud base beneath the updraft, and that's a key feature. They're located with the updraft, and that contrasts with shelf clouds that are with the outflow moving away from the thunderstorm. Now, if a tornado were to develop, it would be within the wall cloud. Now, many supercells, in fact, most supercells have wall clouds, but fewer than 20%. That means less than 1 in 5 of them actually produce a tornado. And that's really good news for us. But there's 3 signs to look for if you're looking at a wall cloud that's capable of producing tornado. The first sign is rapid rotation with upward motion. And when we talk about rotation, we get a lot of questions. Sometimes we get phone calls. I think this cloud is rotating. What we like to say is if you're looking at the cloud, it should be obvious. A rotating wall cloud is something you look at and it's like, oh my gosh, that thing is rotating. If you're having to think about it, it's not rotating. It's really dramatic when you see it in person. It's really ominous when you see it in person. Also, wall clouds that are capable of producing tornadoes also have strong upward motion. That's a sign that it's sucking air in from close to the ground. That's a stage in developing a tornado. And finally, we're not going to talk much about this, but sometimes you may see clear air wrapping around the backside of a wall cloud. That's another sign that we're getting close to producing a tornado. Do have a great video here. This is taken from, I believe, Tim Marshall. He's just a really great storm chaser out in the plains. This video does have audio. But this is an example of a wall cloud that's rotating. It is not sped up, and I want you to see just how obvious it is. You look at that. Yeah, that's definitely spinning. At the very front, you can see it going from left to right. In the back, it's going from right to left. It looks like a barber pole close to the ground. It's very obvious. You can even see some signs of upward motion on the left-hand side of the video there.
Northeast. On the ground again? Yes, sure. Intermittent touchdowns.
By the way, I don't see that. I'm not sure what he's seeing. This is not on the ground. This is just a rotating wall cloud. It should be very obvious when you're looking at it, and this is a great example of that. Also, if you see a wall cloud that looks like it's getting smaller, it's contracting, that's another sign that you're probably heading toward a tornado. All right, so let's say you're out spotting, you've identified the updraft, you've identified a wall cloud, oh my gosh, it's starting to spin. When do we get to a tornado? Well, the first step is a funnel cloud. And the difference between a funnel cloud and a tornado is in contact with the ground. Now, when it's in contact with the ground, it may not be fully condensed. And what I mean by that is it may not look like the cloud is fully touching the ground. The tornado is defined by the airflow, the spinning air, and not necessarily the cloud. So anytime you have a funnel cloud, the next thing to do is to look at the ground. Do you see dust getting kicked up beneath the funnel cloud? If you don't, just a funnel cloud. If you see dust getting kicked up, we have a tornado. We have a great video here. This was being used from permission. This was taken in August of 21? I think maybe it was 2020. But this is a great example as we go from a wall cloud to a funnel cloud to a tornado. Just want to mention this person is driving. You never want to take a video while driving, but we're only showing this video for demonstration purposes. You can see the broad wall cloud. You can see what looks like a funnel cloud on the left-hand side of the picture. Looks like it's extending down. This is the stage. We have to start looking at the ground. Is there any contact with the ground? It looks like it's close. It looks like it's close. Not quite there. Still just a funnel cloud. Ooh, it looks like we may have some dust getting kicked up. Boom, we have a tornado. Notice the cloud is not fully condensed, but you can see dust getting kicked up beneath it. That is a tornado right there. Now with time, as tornadoes get stronger, eventually the cloud does fully condense down, but again, a tornado is defined by the airflow. There we go. So now finally the cloud does actually fully condense down to the ground. This eventually becomes a relatively strong tornado. I believe this was an EF1. Did not hit many things. That's great news. We don't want things to get hit by a tornado. But that is a typical evolution of what you'll see. So anytime you see a funnel cloud, look beneath the cloud, look for signs of kicked up dust. If you don't see dust, just a funnel. If you see dust getting kicked up, you have a tornado. All right, so a lot of storms may have lookalikes. We call that SCUD, or scary looking clouds. These are general questions you want to ask yourselves when you're out spotting. You look at something that looks a little menacing, so a great picture, or a slide to take a picture of. So 4 questions you want to ask yourself. Number 1, is this in the part of the storm where we would expect it? Well, looking at this picture, it sure looks like that's an updraft, but is that a funnel cloud beneath it? What is this thing down here? Maybe we need to investigate this a little bit further. The next question is this oriented in the right direction? Well, most funnel clouds point from top to down, so it's pretty rare for something to be oriented toward the side. Okay, so that doesn't quite check the box. Is it rotating? Well, it's just a still picture, so we can't actually infer if it's rotating. But in this particular example, I will tell you it is not rotating. This is not a funnel cloud. The next question we can ask, is it in contact with the ground? Well, I can see clear air beneath that entire cloud. It's not in contact with the ground. This looks pretty scary. This is something we should probably keep a close eye on, but it is not a funnel cloud and not a tornado yet. The key features you want to be looking for, again, rotation should be very obvious. You look at it, you think, oh my gosh, that thing is rotating. If it's contracting, you see upward motion, that's a sign you're getting closer to a tornado. All right, so we have a few quiz questions here to make sure everyone's paying attention. I want to ask all of you, out of these 4 photos, which one shows a wall cloud, A, B, C, or D? Anyone want to take a stab? I hear A, I heard some Bs. Anyone else? Some C? C is the correct answer here. Now this is a little bit tricky. So the A and B look pretty dramatic, but notice especially in A, it goes across the entire sky. That's a shelf cloud. Picture B is kind of an odd angle, but again, it goes across the entire sky. That's another shelf cloud. This is clearly outflow since it's really murky beneath the base of the cloud. Right there is a wall cloud. The answer is C. I will admit to all of you, differentiating between a shelf cloud and a wall cloud is one of the hardest things to do. Sometimes if you put meteorologists in the same room, if you have Mike and me looking at the same storm, we may disagree, and that is okay. Storms are not always perfect. Sometimes they ebb and flow. That's why it's great to be spotting with a buddy. You can bounce ideas off of them. I have one other question here. The part of the storm with the rain-free base and building towers is the what area? Is it the updraft, inflow, downdraft, or wall cloud? Any ideas? A, I'm hearing a lot of A's. That is correct. That is the updraft. And we have the picture of the reminder there. Rain-free base and building towers is the updraft. Inflow is kind of a tricky answer. That's air going into the updraft. It's kind of hard to take a picture of inflow since air is clear. You can't see it. But this is an example of an updraft. I have one more question here. If you spot a wall cloud, a tornado is likely to occur soon. Is that true or false? Yes. I'm glad to hear everyone say false. That is false. Only 20% or fewer than 20% of wall clouds produce tornadoes. Again, those features to look for are very obvious: rapid rotation, upward motion. We mentioned strong inflow. I forgot to mention that. When you're looking at a wall cloud, let's say the screen is a wall cloud, I should feel the air at my back going into the storm, and better yet, is that air warm going into the storm? That is strong inflow going into the wall cloud. If you're looking at a storm and you feel cold air at your back going into the storm, it's not going to be a problem. And then also, we didn't talk much about it, but if you also see clear air wrapping around the backside of a wall cloud, that's also a sign you have to keep an eye on it. I'm going to pass it on to Mike here to talk about spotter and forecasting tools. There you go.
Thank you, Brett. All right, so we're going to jump ahead to another very important part of spotting, in addition to understanding and recognizing storm features, is planning ahead and being prepared. So we call that situational awareness, and you want to have a high amount of situational awareness really anytime we're dealing with threatening weather. So a little bit about why spotters are so important to us at the Weather Service or as warning decision makers. Part of it is we have tools that are great, like the radar, we have satellite, we have really sophisticated models and so forth. But a lot of those things, none of those things actually tell us what's going on at the ground. So that's why we need trained folks that can do that, basically the eyes and ears of what's going on at ground level. So there's we say there's sort of three main ingredients we're looking for as warning forecasters to decide, do we need a warning or not, or we need to cancel a warning, that type of thing. One of those is what we see on radar. Another is what we know the environment is capable of. So is a tornado even possible, hail, that type of thing. And then the third is the verification, the ground truth from spotters. And typically we'll say if 2 out of the 3 of those support putting a warning out, then we'll put the warning out most likely. So notice how spotters are a key of that puzzle for sure. If we look back at how radar works, you've got 2 storms here, the A and B. Our radar is in Romeoville, as Brett mentioned, near the Lewis University Airport. Radar can only see so much. The way radar works is it sends a beam out, and that beam goes out at a slight angle above the ground. So it's a ½ degree above elevation is the lowest beam that it sends out. And then it stair steps up to about a dozen or so different slices above that to try to see as much of the storm as possible. Why is this important? This angle is important because 2 things happen. Because it's at an angle, it's getting higher and higher above the ground as it gets further away from the radar site. So we're seeing the low part of storm A, that's good, but we're up a little bit higher in storm B. The other part of that is the Earth's curvature. So that, as we get further away from the radar site again, we had a little more distance above the ground. So we're not going to see things that are at ground level unless you're extremely close to the radar. Another thing we like to talk about, because there's a lot of confusion about this among the world in general, is the difference between a watch and a warning. So we'll explain it here. Basically, a watch means you need to pay attention. You need to watch out for severe weather, right? Watch means be alert. Severe storms are possible. Over the next several hours, the ingredients are coming together. You need to be paying attention. So as spotters, we don't activate spotters per se, but anytime a watch comes out, that's a good clue that says, all right, I'm probably going to make some reports if something that I see is reportable. So that's your activation, if nothing else. Sometimes we get warnings, which are going to be warnings which mean take action. So severe weather is happening now or is expected to very soon. You need to take action. So this includes, of course, seeking shelter. The basic rule for any severe weather, especially tornadoes, is go inside a substantial building, go to the lowest floor, and put as many walls between you and the outside world and as few windows as possible. So it really comes down to minimizing your risk and your exposure to the outside world. So get into a substantial building, go to the lowest floor, keep as many walls between you and the outside as possible. Sometimes you get warnings without watches. Typically that's going to be in a situation where we're thinking about isolated occurrence, so isolated coverage of storms, something not really well organized. So be aware of that as well. All right, so into this spotter tools or the spotter preparation. And this is really valid whether you're going to be out making reports or you're just going about your daily business. So we want high situational awareness, like I said. In a perfect world, everybody is assessing the weather every time they start their day. And that's probably true of most folks in this room tonight, otherwise you probably wouldn't be here. But this is something you can share with your friends and family, coworkers, and so forth, the people you know. A daily weather assessment. Ultimately, you want to know the what, where, and when of any weather hazard. So whether we're talking about winter storms or here we're focusing on severe thunderstorms, tornadoes, floods. What, when, and where. So this is going to help you plan ahead. What's good about that? So on any given day, we talk about a severe weather threat. So let's talk about tomorrow night or tomorrow afternoon. We're talking about thunderstorms, a pretty decent level of severity possible, kind of 3 out of the 5 scale that we'll talk about from the Storm Prediction Center in just a second. That's a pretty good risk for us. Risk is late afternoon into the evening time. So what are you going to be doing during those times? Who's got plans tomorrow night outside the home? You're going somewhere, that type of thing. A few folks. So where are you going to be when these storms are expected to roll through? If we're talking warnings and severe storms, where are you going to find a safe space? If you're out, do you have kids or family at home or they're with a babysitter? Do they know about the threat? So weather awareness is key just in your daily life, not just if you're spotting. So you have that heads up. Let's say it's in the morning. You get that information. There's a threat. Now we want to begin to monitor the situation. So we look at things like radar. We'll show you that type of thing. The information and the awareness is what's going to keep you safe. So I mentioned a couple of these products already. So if we kind of go about our daily weather assessment, one thing we could look at is the Storm Prediction Center outlook, convective outlooks. So you've maybe seen these on TV, you maybe sought these out on the SPC website, what have you. That's a good place to start. We have usually a series of weather story graphics that are out on our social media feeds or our website. They're going to, in terms of severe weather, they're going to basically be on the same page with the Storm Prediction Center. We collaborate as needed. We have a hazardous weather outlook. It's a text product, we call it. It's a bunch of words. And that outlines very specifically the what, when, and where of any hazardous weather, even out through the next 7 days. We talk about the storm motion, and we also have a spotter activation statement, it's called. So what we'll generally say is we're going to expect to need storm reports later on tonight, for instance. All that information is in one place. That's on the website. That's on NOAA Weather Radio as well. We'll talk about that too. Weather.gov/Chicago. Hopefully you all picked up a handout when you came in the building tonight, and that's got links to this information. It's also got the reporting criteria that Brett's going to talk about a little bit later. But weather.gov/Chicago, you put your zip code in, you click on the map, you can get your 7-day forecast, as well as access to all these other products on this page too. So it's kind of a one-stop for that information. We do our preparation, we know there's a threat. Let's start thinking about the details, and we do that monitoring as the day progresses. Watches might come out. Probably a pretty decent chance we're going to have watches out tomorrow. So again, that's your heads up that things are going to start to get very active. We put out what we call graphical nowcast, or GNows. They go to social media, they go to the website, and we're going to provide some sort of interpretation of what's going to be happening over the next 1, 2, or 3 hours. So are there existing storms that are moving in our direction? Are those going to get stronger? Are they going to maintain? Are they going to fall apart? Are new storms going to develop? What are the threats associated with those storms? The hail that we might be dealing with, the tornado potential, that type of thing. And of course, radar. Who's got a radar app on their phone? All right, just about everybody, right? You can find radar everywhere. So put this information together. That can be very helpful for you in terms of maintaining or building your situational awareness. And of course, warnings, severe thunderstorm warnings, tornado warnings, even flash flood warnings. They tell where the storm is, where it's going, and what it's capable of. So they're going to come out very frequently on severe weather days. Do you have more than 2 ways to get a warning? We always want to have redundant methods to get these weather warnings or these weather alerts. And that's for a couple reasons. First, one may fail. Your phone battery dies, the cell tower goes out, the weather radio transmitter has a problem. Who knows? The other part of it has to do with us as humans. Sometimes we're stubborn. And sometimes we need multiple taps on the shoulder or multiple things ringing in our ear to actually get us to take action. So that's what the social science studies have shown after big severe weather outbreaks. So it's to get your attention and to make you believe what's going on. That's the other key part about spotter information too. We use your information and we put it back out to the world in warnings. So you've probably heard a warning say, Doppler radar indicated rotation or a storm capable of producing a tornado. Now, you've also heard warnings that say trained spotters reported a tornado 4 miles northeast of Rochelle. Which one are you more likely to actually believe and take action upon? Probably the one with the spotter report. Someone else saw it. An actual person saw this thing. So that brings credibility. So your information is very important to us. A little bit more about radar here. This is the inside of our radome. So Brett mentioned the big soccer ball or golf ball that our radar sits in. It looks like a big satellite dish, actually. It's 28 feet in diameter, so it's big. And this is Will, our electronics technician, doing some maintenance on it. It's turned off. He can push it around with one arm. So he's a pretty strong person anyways, but it's very well balanced. It's a precision piece of equipment. The radar beam gets transmitted out, and it runs into things in the atmosphere. So maybe ice crystals, raindrops, what have you, birds, dust sometimes if it's in its sensitive mode. Those things reflect energy back, and that's what we get in terms of what we see on our radar image. So you've probably all seen a radar image that looks like this. The bright colors are the precipitation, maybe the hail, thunderstorms. I mentioned that the radar scans at multiple different stair-step levels. So what this image is this is a loop of the radar basically going up from its lowest level to its highest level. So as it kind of starts over here, you kind of see a few things. Some of the times the colors get a little bit brighter here as we get into the middle part of the storm. That's where good hail production is probably happening. We go higher above that, we start to see less. The radar's starting to overshoot those other storms that are on the radar, except the ones that are very close. So we have access to a whole volume of data, we call it, to try to assess what's going on in the storm. It's called the Doppler radar because it can determine if air is going towards the radar site or away from it. That's called the Doppler effect. So if you've ever stood at a metro station waiting for a train, maybe a freight comes by or an express, it sounds kind of one frequency as it comes towards you, and then as it passes you, it sounds like a different frequency. It's called the Doppler shift. This is the same sort of idea. So typically we use reds and greens on our color palette. Green is going towards the radar, and then red is going away. So if I have an air parcel with my red dot here, air comes towards it, then it moves away. It changes color on our color table. So this helps us see the motion in the storm. That's what's going to help us find the rotation and things like that. We look for different patterns. I'll show you a couple of these coming up that tell us if it's rotation or maybe it's a downburst. A downburst is basically like a really strong downdraft, as Brett described earlier. Is air coming together, converging, or is it diverging, spreading out? So here's some examples. This is the image, it's a radar image from back in June of 2021 with the Naperville-Woodridge tornado. Here's our radar site here. Here's what we're used to seeing. We call that reflectivity. That's the precipitation part of it. Here's the velocity part of it. So which direction is the air moving? So in this case, we have greens and bright blues even, so very strong winds that are aiming towards the radar site. We jump ahead in time a little bit and zoom in. We've got a few things going on. The radar site is down here. So we have these winds blowing towards the radar, but something up here kind of catches our eye. You have very bright greens against very bright reds. So air moving in two different directions in close proximity. That's our rotation. In that case here, this is the part of the storm that's producing the tornado that occurred, that EF3 tornado. And we see some clues in the radar reflectivity as well. The bright spot there is actually debris being detected by the radar as the tornado is destroying things, unfortunately, and there's a little bit of a notch there. So there's a lot of radar signatures we look for as forecasters. If we zoom in, green toward the radar site, red away, and you can see that circular motion that's going on. Here's another imagery, another piece of imagery. This is from August of 2021. And I'll let this start over again, but same type of image. Here's our radar. As this starts over here, if we watch down in this direction, we see very bright green and very bright red. So green is towards us, red is away from us. So air is actually spreading out. So that air is actually falling from the sky. It's a very strong downdraft, and it hits the ground and is deflected outward. That's a downburst. And you'll see another one here as well, a little further to the northeast. That tells us that very strong straight line winds are occurring. These can be 60, 70, 80, even 90 miles per hour in situations like this. So it's a really good tool. Just a little bit of insight into what you might be seeing on some of your apps and so forth. The whole idea is to be prepared. Have that good weather awareness, know what tools you can use to monitor and keep your situational awareness up, and ultimately keep yourself ahead of the game. This plays into storm spotting safety. Again, situational awareness is going to keep you safe, or at least give you a better chance of being safe as you see these storms. Safety is your number one priority. The nice thing about storm spotter safety is if you're being a safe spotter, you're also being effective. And those two things have to go hand in hand in order to report things and see things that we're looking for. We'll talk more about that in a couple slides here. So only spot where we have a good view of the sky. Nighttime spotting is difficult to impossible at best. Your spotting location might be your front porch, looking out your front window. Perhaps you go out to a spot that's got clear of trees, is maybe a little higher up. It's up to you. Always be aware of your surroundings. Lots of things are happening on thunderstorm days. You saw all that radar imagery. There's usually a mess of storms, clusters of storms. It's very rare that we kind of get these nice single cells that are off by themselves. What's developing nearby? Behind you, to your side. What about above you? So there's lots of things going on when storms are occurring. Is the storm moving towards you, or what direction is it moving? Very important information to know. Do you have a way to get away from it? Maybe that's as simple as going down your basement steps because you're still in your home, or maybe you're out mobile and you need to get in the other direction. You have to plan these things ahead of time. Brett mentioned this earlier, spot with a partner if you can. You can discuss what you're seeing. One person can maybe pay attention to the radar, one person can maybe make the report. If you're mobile, one person needs to drive the vehicle, the other person needs to focus on everything else, right? It's bad enough with people paying attention when there's good weather. Think about people who are maybe untrained and unfamiliar with what we're seeing here. They're probably going to be paying attention to those clouds that they're seeing and not what they're doing with their vehicle. We don't encourage storm chasing, and we'll never ask a spotter to drive into a storm. Again, safe spotting is effective spotting. If you're close enough to see something, there's no reason to get any closer to it. You should be putting more distance between you and whatever you're looking at, ultimately that storm. This here is sort of the last resort slide. We want to do our planning. So we want to stay out of these situations. So general weather safety first. We talked about this before. Go indoors, go to the lowest floor, put as many walls between you and the outside world and as many windows as possible. If you have a basement, maybe even go into the stairwell. A lot of folks nowadays, they have a preparedness kit at their home. They put it in their safe spot. Maybe that kit even includes a helmet. So a bike helmet, football helmet, hockey helmet, whatever you have. Blunt force head trauma is the top related reason why people die in tornadoes. So consider things like that. If you're outdoors, again, these are situations that you want to avoid in the first place because you have good weather awareness. Find a sturdy shelter, building, find what you can. As a last resort, lying flat in a ditch or a low spot. They say get out of your vehicle. It's not a good situation to be in either way, but you have to try to maximize your protection. Don't go under things like bridges and overpasses. There's lots of videos out there that show that. Most of those people weren't actually directly in the path of the tornado, and there's been instances where people did that, the tornado went right over them, and unfortunately, they didn't make it out. Don't try to outrun a tornado in an urban area. Again, you should keep your distance from the storm in the first place. Tornadoes can move very quickly, faster than 60 miles an hour. Tomorrow's storms are probably going to be moving at better than 60 miles an hour. Be avoiding falling debris. Even if you're far from a tornado, this is why I want to be inside. So again, our planning should help prevent us being in these situations in the first place. So these are kind of last resort options. So here's a video that shows what it's like to try to spot at night. All right, did you see what they were talking about? Something there, right? Is it rotating? We don't know. Which way is it moving? We don't know that either. A couple key things we need to know, and we don't know them because we can't see anything. The longer we stand here and try to figure out what's going on, the closer it's probably getting to us. and the worst situation we're going to be in. So the short of it is, don't spot at night. Some of you may have to be out there as part of your duty at night when storms are occurring. And the recommendation we have is kind of lower your threshold for what makes you nervous and feel unsafe. Know where your nearest shelter is and be as close as you can to it to get there quickly. So a lot of bad things can happen because we can't see what's going on. The dangers of hail, again, this video here is a good example of what not to do in a situation that you want to try to avoid in the first place. So we're in a pretty dangerous spot, as you can tell by the large hail that's smashing our windshield here. What we also know is that to get large hail in the first place, we need a really strong updraft. And chances are that hail's falling pretty close to the updraft. What else can occur with a really strong updraft? Rotation. What might happen from rotation? Maybe a tornado, right? So maybe there's a tornado that's occurring with this severe thunderstorm, and we may not even see it or know it. So again, in addition to the damage from the hail we're getting, there could be other threats as well that we're dealing with. So in terms of spotting supercells, we use what we call the right-hand rule. When spotting a supercell, position yourself with the heavy rain and hail on your right and the updraft to your left. So this is a top-down view of a supercell. Here's our updraft towards the back of the storm, that green dot there. The blue is all downdraft. We want to be down here with the downdraft, our view of the downdraft over to the right, and the view of the updraft over to the left. If we're up here, this is all rain and hail. We're not going to see through that, right? So we're not being very effective. Same if we're out over here. The storm is probably moving in this general direction. Maybe it'll start to move in this direction or even this direction. But as long as we have some distance between us and it, we're in a pretty safe spot. We also have a nice view of that updraft base, that rain-free base, where the rotation might be, where the tornado might develop. So like I said, safe spotting is also effective spotting. You're anywhere else, you're not going to see the important parts. Also, don't forget about the lightning threat. We'll talk about lightning a little bit later too. Squall line spotting is pretty straightforward. Stay inside. There really isn't going to be anything that you see visually ahead of the storm or until the storm gets to you and maybe does damage that's going to be helpful to us, or something we don't already know is occurring. We know there's probably a shelf cloud for it out ahead of it. Okay, good. Stay inside because they're dangerous. You can't get around them. This could be sending out 100-mile-per-hour winds. Squall line tornadoes. Brett mentioned the EF3 that occurred in the Naperville tornado. While it's pretty rare to have one that's strong with the squall line, tornadoes are going to be developing along these things. Typically they're rain raft and they develop very, very quickly. You're probably not going to see them. So not a good situation to be in. Move indoors, stay away from windows, go to the lowest floor, all that basic safety information. You're not going to see anything that's going to help us. What will help us is once the storm is passed, if you tell us what the storm did. And we'll talk about the reporting in just a little bit. And again, these things can move very fast. That's going to be the case tomorrow. We'll probably end up with clusters of storms or maybe a squall line that's coming across. And it's going to be probably moving at 60 to maybe even 70 miles an hour. So it's going to be on you before you know it. Here's kind of what damaging straight line winds can look like.
Wow, look at this. That is some strong winds right there. Wow. Wow. Look at that. Wow. Oh my God. Oh my goodness. Look at this.
So that escalated quickly, as they say.
Okay.
not really a safe place to be on your deck, even though it's covered. For obvious reasons, there's a lot of stuff blowing around. The deck could come apart, the screen could come apart, stuff could blow through it. But you get the idea. The winds can pick up very, very rapidly with thunderstorms, especially with these squall line type systems.
Look at the size of this.
And there's a little bit of hail as well.
Decent. Some marbles.
All right, so other storm threats. Lightning. Every thunderstorm is going to have lightning. In order for us to get thunder, we need to have lightning that occurs first. Lightning tends to strike the tallest object. Maybe you're out working in the field, you're playing ball, what have you. You might be that tallest object. So again, these are situations we don't want to find ourselves in the first place. Good weather awareness can help prevent these things from happening. If you hear thunder, you're close enough to be struck by lightning. Move indoors. If you notice your hair stand on end, run for it. Seriously, because your energy is being attracted by the energy in the storm, and the lightning is ultimately trying to strike you. A closed, hard-topped vehicle is a safe place from lightning. Kind of stay away from the electronic controls, other fully enclosed buildings, that type of thing. Bad places in lightning, tents, open-sided structures, dugouts, picnic pavilions, anything outside that isn't fully enclosed is a dangerous spot. Yeah, we can see what lightning can do here in this video. So it can do a lot of damage, for sure. Flash flooding is another threat, of course. Flash floods kill more people nationwide than any other storm-related hazard. Most flash flood related deaths, or half of them, I guess I should say, occur in vehicles. Many of those occur at night as well. So if you see flooded roadways or high water, don't cross it. The road could be washed out underneath. Maybe you know your route. Excuse me. Maybe you know your route home from work or from school has a low water crossing or an area that collects water when it rains pretty heavily. You know heavy rain is in the forecast, or maybe just occurred, maybe you avoid that route. Do things to keep yourself prepared and out of these situations. Urban flooding can result in rapid rises of water on viaducts, so maybe you commute into the city, there's always flooding problems under viaducts in some of the expressways or on some of the surface streets. Know where those areas are if you have kind of a typical route you take. Another good video of what not to do when it comes to flooding.
Yep, he just made a mistake. There he goes.
So again, say turn around, don't drown. Never cross a flooded road, especially a situation like that. It's inconvenient, but it could save your life if you take another route. All right, a couple quiz questions. The best place to safely monitor a supercell is from the north side of the storm looking south, from the south side of the storm looking north, right next to the updraft so you have a good view, or using the right-hand rule with the updraft to your left and the precipitation or the downdraft to your right. All right, here's some B, some C, some D. Who says B? All right, a few people. C and D. There we go. Yes, D, using the right-hand rule. So you got that down. Again, this is a good view. We're going to see we're not obstructed by rain at the moment. The storm is moving away from us. We keep our distance. We're in a pretty good spot. You should consider postponing spotting if rain-wrapped tornadoes are a possibility, such as with a squall line. It's nighttime. Storm motions are very fast, maybe greater than 50 or 60 miles an hour. You don't have a partner to spot with, or E, all of the above. All of the above. This might be a situation for tomorrow, perhaps. So, seriously, it's all about keeping yourself safe. Safety is number one. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Brett, and we're going to wrap up with how to report.
All right, thank you, Mike. All right, the last section here, one of the most important sections. You've learned all about weather, severe weather, thunderstorms, and how to be safe. All right, how do we report the weather? So the different types of weather to report to us: tornadoes, hail, damaging winds, flash flooding. We're going to talk about that. Long story short, we want to know about all tornadoes. As Mike mentioned, we could usually infer rotation with Doppler radar, but even rotation doesn't always translate to a tornado. That's a good thing. But if you see a funnel cloud or a low rotating wall cloud, or heaven forbid a tornado, please call us and let us know. We're going to show you the number in a few slides here. Now, anytime you're spotting a tornado, we're going to be looking for where you're located and approximately how far and in what direction to the tornado you are. Notice if the tornado is in your backyard, we don't want to know about it. We want you taking cover. So these are common questions that you're going to hear from us, and we'll go over that again in a few slides here. If you do see a wall cloud and it's not rotating, we don't need to know about it, because remember, 80% of wall clouds don't produce tornadoes. Just flip to that ratio that we talked about earlier. But anytime you see rapid rotation, a funnel cloud, or a tornado, we want to hear about it. Now, when it comes to damaging hail, we're looking for all hail that's larger than about 1 inch in diameter. That's about the size of a quarter. So we have a handy chart here. This is also provided in the handout that hopefully most of you picked up, with a great size chart of hail sizes. One thing we want to avoid is talking about marble size hail. The reason why is because marbles come in different sizes. So if you give us a call and say I have marble size hail, I guarantee the first thing we're going to say is, okay, can you relate it to a size of a coin? Because we don't know how big that marble is. So please relate it to the size of a coin or any common household object like a baseball. Hopefully it's not that big, but a baseball, ping pong ball, or a golf ball. We also love pictures, or if you're able to actually measure it. Hey, I have a ruler, I measured it, it's 2.5 inches in diameter, perfect. We know it's measured, we can use that in our warning decision-making process. Just a couple of great pictures here as well. Now, when it comes to damaging winds, estimating wind speed is notoriously difficult. I'll tell you, I do a poor job estimating wind speeds. If you put Mike and I in the same room and watch the same storm, we're going to estimate the wind speeds differently. If we have trouble doing it, I can guarantee everyone in this room is going to have trouble doing it. So when it comes to reporting damaging winds, like with squall lines like Mike talked about, it's best to wait till after the storm and look at the damage that was produced, because we can do a pretty good job estimating wind speed based off of damage. That's what we're trained to do. This is a great picture to take or a great slide to take a picture of. I always mix up those two words here. As you go from left to right, the wind speed is increasing. Most thunderstorms, if they do produce damaging winds, are somewhere in this category where we are knocking down a few tree branches, usually not that big, maybe 3 to 6 inches in diameter. As you start going toward the right, higher wind speeds is when you start to see more impressive damage. Maybe whole trees are getting snapped or uprooted. Maybe a tree is literally snapped at the base. As you get to over 100 miles an hour, that's typically when you see structural damage. So these are the things that we would like for you to report to us, so that way we can infer the amount of, or the wind speed that was occurring with the storm. Now, when it comes to a tree, we also want to know a little bit more information about that too. One of the number one reports we get is trees down. That's great. We know the storm produced damage, but we don't know how big the tree is. Was this a little, 6-inch diameter tree that was planted last year, or is this a 100-year oak tree that's 3 feet in diameter? Clearly, it takes different wind speeds to knock down those two different types of trees. So we really like to hear about the type of tree, if you know what, the size of the tree, any information you can give us that helps us make an assessment of what happens. Now, when it comes to reporting flash flooding, it's a little bit trickier. Some of you may have home weather stations or even a rain gauge at home. If you have an estimation or a measurement of the amount of rain that fell within a duration, so like 2 inches in the past hour, we will use that. Our radar can estimate rainfall amounts, but there's nothing better than verification, ground truth, what you're all seeing at your own home. Now, if you live along a creek or a river, if you notice it's out of its banks or it's really unusual for it to be so high, give us a call, let us know about that too. But if you do observe flash flooding, the number one thing is to stay away from the water. As Mike mentioned, don't go into the water. Turn around, don't drown. That's a phrase we like to talk about. As you go down on this list here, the severity obviously gets higher. If you notice submerged cars, homes getting inundated, or especially rescues taking places, that's information we want to know about right away, because that's indicating a life-threatening situation. We want to up the verbiage in our flash flood warning. But again, never go into floodwaters, whether by foot or by car. Even if you know the area very well, water tends to erode things. I've seen videos online of people jumping into little potholes and they submerge completely because the hole is like 6 feet deep. So never go into floodwaters, as tantalizing as it may seem. Now, when you're reporting severe weather to us, we want to know about the 4 W's: who, what, when, and where. These are the questions we're going to ask you if you don't provide this information right away. So number one, who you are. We don't need to know your name. We'll take it if you have it, but let us know that you went through the spotter course. Hi, I'm a trained weather spotter. Boom. We know that you went through this course. We know that you know what you're talking about. Next, let us know what you're reporting. Hi, I'm a trained weather spotter. I'm reporting quarter-size hail. Perfect. We know what you're reporting. When did this event occur? Is this something that's happening right now? Some of my favorite phone calls are when there's hail going on. I can literally hear it in the background. I know what's happening. so that way I know it's literally the whole truth. Or is this a situation where you just got home from vacation and noticed that your tree is down in your backyard? We want to know that information too. Hey, I've been gone for 2 weeks, but I noticed that my oak tree is down. We'll use that information. And finally, where did this event occur? We don't need to know your exact address. If you give it to us, we're just going to put it on Google Maps. But the nearest cross street is really important to us. We want to know where you're located. Because ultimately, if we cannot pinpoint your location in relation to a storm, we may have to disregard the report. You may have the best intentions, but if it doesn't line up, we're not going to understand the report. So if the time and location don't, or if they're miscommunicated and it won't match up with radar, that may lead us to have to discount the report. We don't want to do that. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but very often on social media or even on the phone, we get a comment about, I have trees down in Joliet and 60-mile-per-hour winds. Well, there's several questions that come from this. Number one, Joliet's a pretty big community. Where are you located in Joliet? Are you downtown? Are you in the outer reaches of Joliet? How big were the trees? Were they snapped, uprooted? Are there signs that they were rotted? A lot of times we see impressive wind damage, big trees knocked down, but they're rotted in their core. It takes a lot lower wind speed to knock down a rotted tree than a really healthy tree. What kind of trees were they? We mentioned that. And also, do they estimate or measure the wind speed? Some of you may have a home weather station that measures wind speed. We'll take that. But if you're estimating wind speed, we want to know that too. It's pretty amazing how the number one report we get is 60-mile-an-hour winds. That's often what we have in our warning. It's almost like we're training you to report what we think is going to happen. So please just don't report wind speeds. Just report the damage that you're seeing. That's much more helpful for us. All right, so let's go over a great example here. Over the 4 W's: who, what, where, and when. So ring, 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 telephone. Hi, I'm a trained weather spotter. I'm measuring hail 1.25 inches in diameter. The hail fell from about 315 to 320, and I'm located near the intersection of Route 59 and 75th Street in Naperville. Boom, I'm going to say, great, thanks for the report. I'm going to relay that over to the meteorologist and radar. The phone call's 30 seconds, we're good. Some other examples of locations, you can say I'm a mile north of Mendota, roughly at this intersection, or the wall cloud is 5 miles to my north, and I'm looking at it from this direction. I'm at this exit on I-39. We really want to know where you're located. Again, we don't need to know your home address, but a landmark or some sort of cross street, that's going to be really helpful for us. Now, it's completely okay to be uncertain. As I mentioned before, if Mike and I are in the same room, we're looking at the same storm, we may have different opinions of what we're looking at. That's completely fine. If you're not sure what you're seeing, watch it for a little while. If you think a cloud is rotating, keep watching it. Like I said, it's really obvious when a wall cloud is rotating. I mean, it's really obvious, trust me. So it's better to be uncertain than to overstate your certainty in being incorrect. As Mike mentioned, when looking at warnings, we're looking for 3 things, typically radar, spotter reports, or environment. If we get a phone call of a tornado, even if the environment's not favorable or the radar is not favorable, it's pretty hard for us not to issue a tornado warning, just because tornadoes are so destructive. So if you're uncertain with what you're seeing, let us know. That's perfectly okay. Now, we do want to hear from you as well. Let's say there's a severe thunderstorm warning in effect. It's hail in buckets at your house. You're getting golf ball size hail. We want to know about it. Don't assume we already know about it. Because chances are, if you don't make that first report, we don't know about it. Every single warning that we issued should be radar indicated for the first warning because we're trying to get lead time, so we need that confirmation that it's actually happening. Now, at the same time, please don't exaggerate your report just to ensure we have an accurate portrayal of what's happening. If we have a storm on radar that looks severe, looks like it's producing quarter-sized hail, we get a report of baseball-sized hail, that's going to make us pause thinking, whoa, what are we missing here? We're probably going to disregard the report entirely. So please make sure you don't exaggerate. Now, this is a really important slide. I'm going to step out of the way. Please take a picture of this slide. This has our phone number on there. This is the primary way to get a hold of us. We only ask that you use this phone number for severe weather reporting only. The reason why is this goes directly to our operations floor 24/7, 365. If you're using this number to ask us about the forecast, you're clogging up the line for someone else who may be reporting a tornado. So please only use this number for severe weather reporting only. Recommend to put it in your phone right now so you don't forget, especially if you're spotting tomorrow. Other ways to get reports to us is social media. That's especially good for situations where the weather's not as imminent. Let's say you notice a downed tree branch on your way home from work. We're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. We may not respond to every comment, but trust me, we're looking at all of them. How many of you are amateur radio operators? I know we have a few. Oh, there's a lot of you in there. That's awesome. We're also, look at that URL there, the Amateur Radio Club. It's been a little while since we've had them in our office because of the pandemic. We're trying to see if we can spin that up again, but that's another great way to be involved in the community. We also have a report online. I think on the next slide I'll show an example. You can make reports via our website. And finally, there is something called the Spotter Network. It's affiliated with the Weather Service, but it's not actually run by us. That's another way if you're really excited about weather and want to get involved. If your report is urgent, such as a tornado, if there's structural damage, you know there's injuries, we want to know about right away, give us a call. If you notice something like a tree branch down on your way home from work, you don't have to call us. That's a great way to get a hold of us via social media. On our website here, this is just a quick example of where to go to the spotter report. This is our home site. If you hover over current hazards and do submit a storm report, it's going to bring you to the link on the right. And you'll notice on the very top it says submit a report. There's a direct link on there as well. You can take a picture. It's mobile friendly, so if you're on mobile spotting, that will also get a report to us. It goes directly into our system. We see it right away. All right, so how do we actually use our reports? As Mike mentioned, we use them every single day, actually every single minute in the warning mode. Literally, once we hang up the phone, we say, no, hey, Mike, we just had a spotter report quarter-size hail in the storm you warned. We use it right away. Now, we also issue what we call local storm reports. These are used by local media as well. You may sometimes see a report on the news. Quarter-size hail was reported in New Lenox. That may be your report. So we also get it out throughout the weather enterprise. We also provide local publication. It's storm data. It's used by insurance companies and other companies in order to verify that weather occurred. If you don't see your report on our website, don't be discouraged. We use every single report in real time. If we have a really big severe weather event, we're logging all the reports. In the list of priorities, warnings always come first. We're using the reports. We just may not issue that product, the local storm report, until a little bit later on when we have lower priority items. All right, so a couple final quiz questions here. We have a great picture on the right-hand side. How should you report this to the National Weather Service? A, 70, 80 mile per hour winds, trees down, numerous tree limbs down, or lots of damage? What do you guys think? Yes, I like it. That is the right way to report this damage. This is a great example here. It looks like some pretty hefty tree damage. Could have been produced by 70 mile per hour winds, but we don't know that for sure. So that's why you want to report what you see, exactly what you see right there. Another question here. Which of the following should you report to the tornado? A, tornado touching down on my backyard. B, marble-sized hail. C, lots of lightning and heavy rain. Or D, hail about the size of a golf ball. Yes, this is awesome. You're all doing great. Hail about the size of a golf ball. Sometimes we get some questions about answer A. The reason why A is incorrect is because if it's touching down in your backyard, you're in a dangerous situation, we want you to take cover. Let us know after the fact if you have any damage, but the correct answer here is D. And again, please avoid hail about the size of a marble just because marbles come in different sizes. It just takes a little extra effort to figure out how big that hail was. And we have one final slide we added here just because of the severe weather threat tomorrow. Right now, we're sort of in this middle here, the day before forecast. Mike had mentioned how many of you have plans tomorrow afternoon and evening. I know it's spring break for a lot of people. How many of you are going to have kids at home? This is the time when you want to make those final preparations. Make sure you're weather aware. As we get to tomorrow, the day of, Mike mentioned, pretty good chance we're going to have to issue some watches and warnings. That's when you want to flip into that monitoring mode. It's great that you're all here tonight. You're all ambassadors to your friends and family to spread the word, not only about tomorrow, but about all that you learned tonight. Encourage all of you to be active spotters. We really appreciate all of you coming out tonight. And if you have any final words, Mike, I'll hand it to you.
Just a final thank you for coming tonight. I know we're going to turn it over to Dan here in just a second. One reminder, if you didn't grab that handout, we should probably have them at the door, I think, still. If you need a certificate, there's a link on the handout. Go to the link, and you can print off a certificate. But otherwise, you're all set as spotters to start making reports. So thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Dan.
All right, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Brett. You guys did a great job, always very timely. Okay, at this time, I just want to do the drawing. If anyone lost some medication, by the way, somebody turned this in. I won't go over names or anything, but come up and see me afterwards. All right, so please get out your door prize tickets. We have some great tickets.